Thank you so much, Nikki, for your warm presentation and also a very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. Special thank you to our members across EMEA. For us, your engagement, your curiosity, and your continued support is exactly what makes this community worth building. And I recognize some familiar names, and most of all, countries where together we have built momentum and I would say created great memories. So thank you for your membership, but most of all for your friendship. And as you might know, yesterday was the big launch of the Word Rewired. Our CEO, John Bowman, presented it at also LA. And we are doing regional webinars as well to provide some context around this report, whether you have already read it or you are about to. Now, before we dive in, let me tell you what this report is and what it isn't. It's not a playbook with neat answers. It won't tell you which markets to enter or which technologies to back. What it will do is something perhaps more valuable. It will hand you the questions, the ones you need to be asking your boss, your board, your investment committee, or maybe even during a job interview. So if you can't yet articulate these questions, this report will help you get there. Think of it less as a white paper and more as an exercise book. I'll confess my copy is really full of notes. And as you open the report, then John Bauman opens it with a provocation that stuck with me, a word being rewired faster than its own support. So this is a very visual image. So you have a word being rewired faster than its own support structures can keep up with. And then there is what I like to call the Hadrian's Wall moment, where the barbarians didn't storm the gates, they simply walked around them. So that image captures something important about where capital markets stand today. So this is not our normal webinar. This is a call to action. So in EMEA, we have a very energetic community, team of idea generations, and I know that what I love most about this community is that this report sparks an idea for a company presentation, a chapter event, and I know some of you have already been involved with that, team offsite, or simply a conversation you want to take deeper. Or if you just want to share your notes and provide your insights to some of these questions we will be dropping in the course of this webinar, please reach out, as Nikki said, using the Q&A. My colleagues, Monica, Nick, and Adrian are also here to help. We are here, I would say, for your lateral thinking. And if there are any topics you'd like to hear more about or that resonate particularly with you, we want to know that because we will collect your ideas and translate them into tangible activities that could benefit each and every one of us. And one more call to action, a very important one, because we have, as Nikki mentioned, a LinkedIn group. So your engagement on LinkedIn is gold. This is where this conversation lives beyond today, where your questions, your reflections, and your challenges can reach the whole community. So please show up there. But now let's get into the report. As you know, it all started with a feeling that something had shifted, that the old maps no longer match, I would say, the territory. Do you remember what Galileo said in 1633 after being forced to recant everything he believed, after being forced by the Roman Inquisition to recant his assertion that the earth moves around the sun? He looked down, poor thing, quietly and whispered, "Eppur si muove," and yet it moves. And this report, this conversation, this community is our version of that moment. That's where this report was born. It was not born from a spreadsheet. I want to start with a feeling, one I suspect most of you have had at some point over the last couple of years. Whether you're sitting in an investment committee, reading through a manager update, or simply observing how your organization has quietly changed, there is something in the back of our minds. And there is this feeling, the feeling that this time is different. We've experienced a great deal over recent years. If you think about the changing interest rates, the inflation, the market cycles, and the waves of innovation. But something feels fundamentally different about how the entire system works. It is like the underlying logic of how markets operate. This logic has shifted. Now, the thing about a feeling like that is that it is probably easy to dismiss. We are supposed to be data-driven investment professionals, focused on numbers, and the logic behind how decisions are made is our credo. But your ears tend to perk up when you realize that everyone around you is having the same experience, hearing the same type of anecdotes, sensing the same unease. So what we are observing. So why do we at CHI Association feel this way? There are many examples of things we've been hearing anecdotally, and you can probably recognize some or all of them. Markets don't feel normal anymore. Technology is advancing rapidly, and regulators, can barely keep pace with it. Organizations feel their structures are outdated. Geopolitics has moved from background noise to front and center on the investment agenda. And increasingly, the idea that public and private markets are becoming one. The idea that convergence of very distinct asset classes, is coming to real. This is driving an enormous amount of focus on alternative because they become core allocations and not satellite ones. These may have started as isolated data points, but we are hearing more and more of them. They are starting from a pattern. And that underlying question for us at CHI Association was, how do these all tie together? Why are we experiencing all of these anecdotes in the same way and the same time? So to try to answer those questions, we hit the road. And we went to the source, our broader investment professional network. And the goal was mostly to listen and to try to make sense of these anecdotes we've been accumulated. What resulted were conversations across 8 cities: Los Angeles, Toronto, New York, London, Mumbai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Riyadh. I was personally in the room in London and Riyadh, and I can tell you that the energy was the same in both. A shared sense across very different cultures and markets that something fundamental is in motion. I was saying that we were in conversation with over 100 leaders in the C-suite and senior leadership level of some of the world's most significant organizations. You will see the names in the report, as well as of thousands of inputs, both anecdotal and through survey works, from our membership of 14,000 Kaya members. So your voice is also in this report. At every stop, whether we were sitting around a table with CEOs, talking with members, or engaging with the broader, I would say, investment profession, we opened with the same version of the same question. What topic or challenge has co-opted your boardrooms, your investment committees, and your leadership teams today? That was the question. To translate it in a less prosaic way, what keeps you awake at night? So the report reveals something very interesting, because after this global listening tour, we took those observations, questions, and tensions, the one being felt across the profession, and put them down on paper. So the word Rewire is the result. It's meant to speak to everyone, regardless of whether you're a CEO in that roundtable behind a closed door or an entry-level analyst trying to figure out your place in the system. So what we found were 3 interconnected and highly consequential shifts: the macro shift, the industry shift, and the organizational shift. You have to think of them as moving from the most broad, where what's happening in the world, to the most immediate. So what's happening at your desk? So from the world to your desk. If you look at the macro shift, Macro shifts begin with a simple acknowledgement. The rules of engagement have changed. Geopolitics used to be a variable many of us monitor from distance, something we were aware of, but that didn't necessarily factor in the day-to-day decision-making process. What we found during these conversations is that geopolitics is now front and center. It's part of the investment process itself, influencing everything from deal selection to talent development to even gas price. Two observations stood out. First, the map of private capital is being redrawn. It's no longer a single interconnected web tied to one pole of the global economy. Regional clusters are forming across Asia Pacific, the Middle East, and Latin America, each developing their own rules, priorities, and sovereign mandates. Sovereign wealth funds in many of these regional blocks are setting terms. Think about the Gulf, aligning capital with localized strategic objectives in ways that global managers simply can't ignore. Second thing, emerging markets are shifting from recipients of capital to contributors. We heard a great deal about the importance of emerging economies to both portfolio diversifications and economic growth. What's perhaps most significant is the growing focus on these markets as source of new talent. Senior leaders discuss strategy for exporting their capabilities, often US or Western-based practices, to localized offices in these new centers of capital. The role of emerging economies has quietly become as much a talent conversation as a portfolio one. So the question for you, and you can use the Q&A to fill in your observations. How are you and your organizations building macro awareness, geopolitical fluency, regional knowledge, emerging market understanding into due diligence, portfolio construction, and talent development? Then if we go to the industry shifts, industry shifts start with recognizing that the industry has spent years solving one big access problem. How do you give more investors access to private markets without locking up capital for a decade? We offer the solution. The solution so far has been semi-liquid structure, building out capabilities to broaden access primarily through the wealth management channel, allowing individuals to participate in private markets without the constraints typical of more institutional vehicles. But even as product providers, managers, and organizations are building out those capabilities, a different conversation has started in parallel. So the first observation here is that what have two innovations racing towards the same finishing line from opposite direction. So that's a visual image. So two innovations racing towards the same finishing line from opposite direction. On one side, we have the semi-liquid fund structures retrofitting the existing regulatory and operational infrastructure to open up access. On the other hand, we have tokenized products and digital access that would completely rethink the underlying technological architecture. So both are trying to democratize access to private markets, but they operate from fundamentally different philosophies. Semi-liquid structure, manage liquidity through gates and redemption windows. Tokenized access promises 24/7, as you know, continuous trading. The question is whether these approaches are complementary or they are on a collision course. So this is the first observation. The second observation is that the real disruption may not be a better wrapper. It may be an entirely new architecture. Capital calls, distribution, compliance checks. Firms are already running those processes on blockchain rails. So if tokenization becomes the dominant paradigm, the significant resources currently being invested in semi-liquid infrastructure could be obsolete, not gradually, but almost overnight. Imagine putting 500 million US into fax machines right before email emerged. back then email was theoretical and news of its evolution was certainly not reaching everyone's hands by a cell phone in real time. So another question for you. Are we having the right conversations? Or are we so focused on building out the current infrastructure that we are underestimating how quickly the foundation beneath could change? And then we have the organizational shifts. The first two shifts, macro and industry, are largely visible from the outside. These are things we are experience as investment professionals, markets, in policy, in the products we use. But the organizational shift is much more internal and intimate, I would say. And in many ways, it's harder, perhaps even more existential. Again, two observations here. First, all the organizations are moving toward flatter and more agile models, not necessarily as a cultural exercise, but as a functional response to the pace of regulatory change, political shifts, and technological challenges. We simply have to make faster and better decisions in real time. The firms getting this right aren't experimenting anymore. They have recognized thousands of people around cross-functional squads designed to move at the speed the environment demands. The second element is talent. The talent gap isn't just about technical expertise anymore. It's about judgment and complexity. The next generation of investment professionals need more than technical proficiency and skills-based training. Geopolitical awareness, system thinking, digital fluency, and cross-functional judgment are all becoming prerequisites. What was striking in many of our conversations and survey was how many senior leaders felt their organizations simply aren't ready for this evolution. Only 20% of respondents said that they were very confident their organization had the culture of innovation needed to compete in the next decade. So another question to think of. If your firm had to build its organizational model from scratch today, clean slate, rather than retrofit the new within the old, what would it actually look different and what would it actually look like? That's an interesting one. So the word rewired is ultimately a conversation started across our profession. As you can see in this image, the compass is fragmented and the world is being rewired and reordered beneath our feet. We would encourage you to listen, to read, and obviously discuss because we are in this together. The report is available to download now. I hope you will enjoy the reading and I hope you join us in the ongoing LinkedIn conversations where we will be engaging our members and the broader community over the upcoming months. And remember, this is a collective exercise that CAI Association will be focused on in the future, now and in the future. So thank you, and thank you for sharing your impressions with us.